Thanks for tuning in to Watermark Equipment Tips. My name's Leif. This week we're going over PTSA. What is PTSA? How does it help me? How can I save money? And how can I avoid making some costly mistakes? So getting started, what is PTSA? So PTSA is an additive. You would introduce it to your active chemistry, and this would be a passive or an inert dye that you basically can then monitor. You can monitor it using a handheld or a dedicated inline probe. How does the probe actually see this dye? PTSA has a very unusual response to a certain wavelength of light. If you shine a blue light on this molecule, it may return a red light. These actual colors are in kind of the non-visible spectrum, but to give you an idea, it's a very unusual reaction, and these specialized handheld and inline probes basically do this, and then they can detect very, very, very small amounts in the parts per billion realm of this PTSA dye. Now that we've gone over what PTSA is and how it can help you, the next is to understand a little bit more about the actual installation to give you everything you need to avoid making some costly errors. So out of the box, this probe is going to be putting out a 4 to 20 milliamp signal tied to your controller. 4 milliamps out of the box is going to be 0 parts per billion of PTSA product. 20 milliamps is then going to be 200 parts per billion. Control range on the controller is typically around 100 parts per billion. That chemistry can vary based on your treatment profile, but you should be seeing around 12 milliamps when you're close to 100 parts per billion. It's important to familiarize yourself with that scale, because if your controller thinks it's seeing 175 parts per billion, but you're only seeing maybe 8 milliamps, something's wrong with your calibration. You need to pull the probe, inspect it, ensure it's clean, and probably be resetting your calibration as well. You want to make sure you're staying on your control equipment as close to the factory calibration as possible, and that anytime you're drifting, you're addressing it by first inspecting the probe and ensuring it's clean. Second, recalibrate the probe using the probe recalibration tool versus adjusting a 4 to 20 scale on your controller. Adjusting your 4 to 20 scale will typically lead with your range being narrowed, and you don't get as precise control on the controller. So always pull the probe, inspect it, clean, and then recalibrate the probe. The other thing I want to ensure that you do anytime you're feeding inhibitor off of a PTSA probe is use a limit timer. If your probe reading goes bad for whatever reason, you want to ensure that you have a limit timer set so that you don't suck a full drum of chemical and dump it into the tower. Limit timers are going to basically time every single time that relay turns on and ensure it doesn't stay on for longer than a certain amount of time. If you want to go a step further, tie that limit timer into the cloud and then get emailed anytime your relay has come on for too long. Similarly, you can set high and low thresholds on your PTSA value so that anytime you're out of range, again, you're notified, you can do something about it. That's all we're going over this week on Watermark Equipment Tips. Hope you got something useful that you can use to make yourself better. Stay tuned for our next episode. And also, please visit us on the iOS App Store and the Android App Store to get our new Watermark app. Thanks for tuning in. See you again soon.